Hi there, my name is Jeremy Brown. I'm the evangelist here at Geist Interactive. And today I'm here at your user group to talk about JavaScript, and not just any old JavaScript, not just everything about JavaScript, but a specific JavaScript learning path. And I think this is what I'm going to present to you today is just a very good way, a pretty well thought out way for FileMaker developers to learn JavaScript. There's a lot of JavaScript out there. People spend years and years studying the language. But FileMaker developers can actually learn a part of it and be very successful. If you've been in the forums for any amount of time, you've seen the increase in JavaScript questions being asked. JavaScript is now part of the FileMaker world. It's always been, or at least since about FileMaker 9 or 10, but it's really getting front row and center here. It's really stepping forward as a tool for us to take a look at. FileMaker developers can afford to spend time working with JavaScript and really should take advantage of what is out there. FileMaker 19 comes to us this year as the first open platform. One of the possibilities, one of the reasons it's an open platform now is because it uses JavaScript, because it can work with JavaScript in a much better way than previous versions. FileMaker 19 brings us three features that specifically focus on JavaScript. The first one there in the top left is the FileMaker script step, where we can communicate to JavaScript, to a JavaScript library, to a interface in the web viewer, and use a FileMaker script to update the widget inside the web viewer. We weren't able to do that before today. Well, we were, but there were a lot of workarounds and silliness. We don't have to worry about those silliness anymore. Over in the top right there, we see an add-on. These add-ons are a tremendous new feature that is coming to the platform, and we'll hear more of later on. But it's pretty awesome to know that we can install a fully functional add-on into our apps and just have it work. I mean, we don't have to do anything with it. And a lot of the add-ons that we'll see are built with JavaScript. Add-ons are a big part, and they are going to be, they're going to further push people into looking at JavaScript. Now, I'll say this, and Todd has said this, Chris Ippolite has said this, many people have said it already, you don't have to know JavaScript to use those add-ons. The whole point of an add-on is to bring in a complete package of functionality. You don't have to worry about what's under the hood. Just like, a portal. You don't know how a portal works. You don't get to get into the code to look around into it and understand it. You just let it work, right? I know we all love to tinker with things, and I encourage tinkering, but these add-ons are kind of like portals. They're kind of like button bars in that you just drag them onto the layout and they work. And then in the bottom left there, we see a new JavaScript function that allows us to communicate back to FileMaker. And I'll go into detail on this in a little bit. But this is tremendous because we can, over there on the add-on, I can click on one of those open buttons, those gray open buttons, and I can run a FileMaker script and open up a card window and do something with that data. So these right here have just pushed this forward. It's really worth a FileMaker developer's time to study this. And as I will get into this, I don't want to discourage you with the JavaScript language, the thing that runs the internet. That's not the point of today, but it is worth exploring it. So FileMaker developers themselves are actually exploring JavaScript more. I think I'm really excited about that, especially since the release of FileMaker 19. People are really pushing to get into it. We see, this is a really bad picture, but I did a search this morning on the Claris FileMaker community and found for JavaScript, just the word JavaScript. And I found 635 posts. And there's this cool little filter off to the left, this like range slider thing. And it looks like for at least the past 2 years, there's been a lot of responses. I think in the last 2 years, there's been probably close, if not half, of the total responses in the community. So, and you can see that by those bars being pretty high. So even FileMaker developers, beginning people that have been in it for 20 or more years, are taking a look at JavaScript. And I think they feel it. I think they've said it too, but I feel like they stumble around. They flounder. I like that word. They flounder around in the JavaScript language, asking themselves this question or these questions. What should I learn and where should I learn it? This has definitely come up in that people ask me, how do I get into JavaScript? How do I start to learn it? They ask, what should I learn? And this kind of thing. These are the questions that I want to try to help people answer for themselves, mainly because I struggled with these, but being a teacher, I was a teacher for 15 years. I taught in elementary and middle school. And I really pushed my students to question and to continue to learn. And this just struck me. I pushed through these questions and I floundered in JavaScript and FileMaker until I found what I think is a pretty good path. And that's what I want to share. There are tons of learning sites out there. I just picked up like 10 or 15 here that you could learn the entire scope of the JavaScript language. And these are great courses. I know many people who have gone through many of these and have come out with good information. My colleague Barbara Cooney is working with Wes Boss's courses, and she's learned a lot of JavaScript from that. So that's really great. Again, the thing about these are that they're complete packages. They're the entirety of the JavaScript language. They may break it up into like sections and concepts and they may break it up into topics, but these are still going to get you the complete knowledge of JavaScript. You may have to take a beginner course and then an intermediate and advanced course, but it's going to get you the course. As I was doing some preparation for this whole idea, I stumbled on this JavaScript learning path that someone put up here. And it's more front end. I think it uses JavaScript as the language here, but this is really, it's showing us one person's opinion of what somebody needs to learn to be a good front-end developer. That is to create the web pages or the UI that can be used for a UI element in a web page. So we've got a lot of paths there. I'm just going to scroll back through those to get the full effect of things that are out there to learn. And yes, I think this person up in that box in the top left there, you see some color codings, which I think is great. So you don't have to learn all of this, but it's still a little bit overwhelming. And as someone who has spent my time in JavaScript a lot, this feels overwhelming even to me. So that's the problem. The problem is that as FileMaker developers, we are FileMaker developers. We're not web developers that need to focus our entirety of our attention and any of that on the web and using JavaScript. We are FileMaker developers. We still have to develop in FileMaker. We still have to know that platform very well. So here's how I see it. There are problems or factors that play into our getting into JavaScript. And I think that these also do a lot to limit people's willingness to get into the platform. Number one, we already have stuff to do in FileMaker. We have a bunch of tasks to accomplish that are FileMaker based. We have a lot of work to do there. Our brain power is limited and at a premium. I don't know about you, but I just don't have the brain power to learn everything out there that I feel like I need to learn. here at Geist Interactive, we build a lot of React JavaScript apps. That's a framework of JavaScript. And while I thought I knew JavaScript, React was a whole different thing, and it really raised my stress level about what I had to learn. And of course, time. Even though we're all bunkered down in our homes, and we can't go outside and all this stuff, we still time is very important, very valuable to us. I have 3 dogs, and they demand a lot of my time. And I have a 4th foster dog who's got heartworms and hookworms, and she's was abandoned, and so I'm working with her. So I just don't have a lot of time to, and I'm sure you all have very important things as well to do. Here is, in my opinion, the solution. And this is what I call the JavaScript learning path for FileMaker developers. Specifically, I call it JavaScript in FileMaker. This here is what I have determined is a very good branching path to learn JavaScript enough to be competent developers. I'm just going to let you look at it for a minute here. I'll get into details in a bit. But I've developed this path, actually, this branching path on purpose. Number one, it's a path, but it's sort of like it goes in all directions, because you as a FileMaker developer can pick parts of this and learn it in different chunks in different times. There's no straightforward path that goes from point A to B. It kind of just mixes all together, it branches off, and it goes different directions at different times. So that's this. And secondly, this is a result of the craziness that has gone in my head where I started to learn JavaScript. I spoke at another user group recently, and I talked about my JavaScript journey, but it really started in about 2015. I really didn't know much. I didn't know any JavaScript at all. I was working at Salient Consulting. I had some spare time, and I decided to kind of come up with a standard way to work with JavaScript and FileMaker. But my silliness in that project was that I didn't know JavaScript in the first place. So it was hard to really to get it. But 5 years in, and I'm doing okay. I think I'm able to solve a lot of problems. So these are, and this is broken up into 2 things. We'll take a look at that in a minute. So here is the purpose of this path. The basic purpose is to just focus on our attention, our FileMaker developers' attention, on what we need to study. Okay, I'm going to be negative here and say we don't need to learn everything about the JavaScript language. There's just so much out there that doesn't apply to what we need as a FileMaker developer. Okay, and I can't name anything right now because I'm not focused on what I don't need to learn. I'm focused on what we need to learn. It keeps our learning, this path keeps our learning tied to normal FileMaker use cases. So there's 5, I've identified 5 things that we do in FileMaker all the time. And when I mean use cases, I mean like techniques or like flows of work that you as a developer would do. So it keeps it tied, this path keeps it tied to FileMaker strongly because we are FileMaker developers. And the third thing is unquantifiable for sure, but it gives us our biggest return on investment. We can learn the things on this path, and it will help us do much in the web viewer in our FileMaker apps in a much faster rate than if we tried to attend to the whole language. So here's what it looks like again. On the right side here are some use cases. And I've identified, in my opinion, and I think I speak from my experience, but I've got a lot of experience of that. Here are 5 use cases, what we will do every day with the web viewer. Anytime we want to work with the web viewer, anytime we want to work with the JavaScript library, here are things that we'll do. We're going to do some actions. We're going to perform some actions. That is, we're going to click a button in the web viewer and make something happen in the web viewer, or make something happen in FileMaker. We're going to click a FileMaker button and make something happen in the JavaScript. We're going to manipulate data. This, to me, is the biggest key. And I really, like, a light bulb went off in my head, and an epiphany, it just blew up in my head when I realized this right here is one of the key things, is we're manipulating data. We're taking a found set of records from FileMaker, preferably, in my opinion, using the new FileMaker, execute FileMaker data API script step. And we're manipulating it to fit what we need in the JavaScript library or the thing we're working on. I'll show you details about that, examples about that in a bit. We work every day loading code into the web viewer. So getting the JavaScript, getting the HTML and CSS in there, we need to know how to do that. We need to know the various ways to do that and when to use those and so forth. We also want to load data. It sounds like they're the same, but it's really not. You could actually load an entire JavaScript thing in your web viewer, and then after that, load data in there. And you can keep on loading new data in there and updating the web viewer, updating the screen, the UI there. And of course, we want to get data back from FileMaker. We want to click on a row and send the primary key of that row back to FileMaker to find the record, open up a card window, and allow the user to edit the data. So in my mind, these are the 5 things that we'll do every single day. And I'll tell you, these 5 things are represented in this right here. I'm actually building this for my Claris Engage session. This is a survey here, and I can show it to you in using FileMaker in a few minutes. But the summary of this is, I have a survey that I want sliders to be used. In this case, it's just 7 questions. And I am using my JavaScript skills and a JavaScript library to create this layout, to create this widget so that people can slide the slider, and the answer will get sent back to the appropriate question in the table. This all came about because of the skills that I've been able to develop and from these use cases. So all of these use cases are kind of represented in this one widget that I'm working on. So the other thing that we're going to do a lot is we're going to work with JavaScript libraries. A library is a set of code that someone has already built that has been packaged up in such a way, and we can just plug it into our file and play it. We don't have to worry anything about the JavaScript library because we know that the developer has worked on it. And the good thing about these libraries are that hundreds and thousands of people have used them and tested them and reported bugs. And if the developer is any good, she will fix them and release new versions. So we work with JavaScript libraries, and this is just a quick example. All the JavaScript libraries that I've worked with come with different options, and you can see it here. It's actually in a JSON or a JavaScript object here, because the keys are not quoted in this object like series or chart. But this is a typical option set that comes with the library, and I'll show you this in detail in a bit. But with these options right here, I can create this chart, this 5 series chart summarizing data for the year of 2019. If I just make a couple changes, that is, if I change the type from, see, it was line first and now it's bar, and I change that option from stacked from false to true, I get a whole different experience. I get a whole different look of the same data. And that's just a taste of what we can do as FileMaker developers with a JavaScript library. And again, my Engage session will go more into details on how to work with these individual ones that you've seen and others. I'll say it again, this learning path here, I call it, this JavaScript and FileMaker mind map I think is one of the most complete cold versions of JavaScript that one can go through. We don't have to go through an entire Wes Bos course to be effective in JavaScript in FileMaker. We can pick parts of his course that correspond to the use cases that we see here to be successful at FileMaker. We can learn those things and then we can bring it into our FileMaker work. In a few minutes here, I'll show you some details, but we're going to take a look at the two use cases called perform actions and manipulate data. And I'll show you examples of those. Clear on the far right there. So let's just follow this for a second. I'll go into details about this, but we'll start with the perform actions here. I'm just going to focus on this one. That's the FileMaker use case. As I go further to the right, I see that I'm starting to get a little bit technical in language. Perform actions is not very technical. It actually makes sense to us from a FileMaker point of view. We actually do that. We write scripts, we create buttons and so forth. But when we branch off of performing actions, we see functions, we see declaring, we see calling, we see parameters. And then from there, we get even more technical, where we get into the nitty gritty of the JavaScript, the actual technique or the actual skill that is in the JavaScript language. So for functions, there are roughly 3 types of functions that are important for us to know. There's an arrow function if you're not using a Windows machine. There's a normal function and there's an anonymous function. So those are things that you can take this path and you could say, all right, I'm going to go read all I can about functions. And if you really study and focus on these 3 items here, you can be successful in a FileMaker context with the JavaScript. Manipulating data, that branch there has a ton of branches. And this is probably where you would spend the most of your time because it's probably the thing that you're going to spend most of your development time on. If you remember back that slider that I showed, I probably spent 2 hours last night trying to build a JavaScript function that could take all of the elements in my array, in the array of questions, and evenly create the question section, the question div, and the slider, and then distribute them evenly among columns across the table, so the web viewer. So it took some time, but that's part of manipulating data, taking the data from FileMaker and reconfiguring it to fit into your widget. So again, for manipulating data, I took that branch called arrays because I had an array. And I used that next branch called reconfigure. And then I used a FileMaker or a JavaScript function called for each. Yeah, I did for each. Because that's a JavaScript function that will help me work with the arrays that I've gotten back from FileMaker. Now, you may not work with arrays, that's okay. You could work with dates or numbers or strings, and there are still things that you can do with manipulating data to fit here. So this is the path that I would suggest we go on. Now, there is some stuff. We are technical people, and so there is some technical stuff that we will need to know, and this is sort of isolated. It doesn't really have anything to do with FileMaker. It's just the technical about JavaScript and the web viewer in general. So we do need to know some HTML stuff. Yep, that's for sure. The good thing about how I would present it and how I'm going to be able to present it is that this is part of the discussion. When we're solving a FileMaker use case like manipulating data, we're going to also take a look at div elements and IDs in the HTML DOM, the document object model. So these are technical, and it'll get a little bit technical here, but we can handle it. We also have some styling to focus on, to understand. We have to learn a little bit, not everything. I don't know everything about CSS and styling in a web viewer in a browser window, but I can do some good stuff. And of course I don't know, I look it up. But these are some of the things that I look at every day when I'm doing some development in JavaScript. So I'm bringing that as part of the learning path to say, this is what we can do. Now, just generally, this looks like a lot, but the cool thing is we're all FileMaker developers. Many of you have been in it for 20 years. So we can take what we know about FileMaker and apply it to JavaScript. We know conceptually what variables are in FileMaker, and it's almost the same over in JavaScript. We know conceptually how to write a script, and we know about conditional logic. We know ifs and loops and such. All of that stuff can be applied to JavaScript as well. So none of us are coming into this path with a blank slate. We're carrying a heck of a lot of knowledge with us to help us get through this easier and to help us understand what to do with this. This looks a little bit intimidating because there's a ton of stuff here. There's a ton of words here, but it's really not because of our extensive FileMaker background. Does it feel intimidating? Does this screen feel intimidating to any of you? I'm serious. This is the first time anybody outside of Geist Interactive has seen this. So I'm interested in your thoughts about this, and I'd love to hear your feedback about this. Too much, too little, too blah, blah, blah. What do you think? Jonathan, you said when you break it down, it doesn't look that complex. And it's not. I mean, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you're going to get the for each function wrong many, many times. But how many of us have ever written a perfect execute SQL statement the first time we started using it, you know?
How syntactically rich is it?
Syntactically rich.
I mean, is the syntax super critical or?
Yeah, there are some concepts of JavaScript that you'll need to know. FileMaker, it doesn't care about a variable that's got an uppercase first letter or a lowercase one. It'll still read it the same. Same with layout names and script names and all that stuff. JavaScript is very tight with that. You have to have the correct case for the variable that you want to use throughout.
Yeah, what I was going to say though is that the only reason why this chart looks, or this mind map looks complex is because you have the whole picture. But when you showed the individual sections, when you go into when you went into the HTML, all of that was familiar. Yep. When you go into the CSS, all of that is familiar. So when you look at those individual sections, you know it makes a whole lot of sense. It's the mind looks at the entire thing though and says, "Oh, that's really complex." But you know, if you go in and drill down, it really isn't. There's just there's little data points that you look at them and you go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." And so I appreciate the organization because I'm a little OCD myself too, and I really like it, and I like to think in outlines as well. And this is very much just a nice outline of what all is involved. And I screenshotted it. I hope you don't mind, because I'm definitely going to refer to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and we'll definitely make this available. The point of this, I think, is for you as a FileMaker developer to take this, just a second, Beverly, to take this mind map and go and study it on your own. Buy a Wes Bos course and focus on the lessons, the videos that talk about the things that I've got on here, because all of this is just common JavaScript stuff. I'm just reorganizing it. So Wes Bos may spend a whole couple lessons teaching you about variables, and that's good, but you definitely, if you're trying to take an array of a found set of records, you need to know how to manipulate that. So you need to go and study his map, array.map course video, or his for each course, or so forth, because that's what you're going to need right away. Beverly.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of add to what Jonathan said. If we had a map like this that was for FileMaker Pro, 4 throughout Go and WebDirect and Server, just for FileMaker Pro and all the stuff that we can branch off of. It would be very complex like this as well.
Yep.
And we do the same thing, is we take little pieces of it at a time, and then we understand that, and then we add on and we merge and we integrate, and we're fine. So you're right on, Jonathan, that when we look at this, it is really intimidating. I mean, I've been doing JavaScript since it's been JavaScript, and I don't know it all. And if we kind of emphasize that, you know, just take a small part, get to that point, you know, or like Jeremy said, you start with, what do I want to do? What do I need to know to do what I want to do? Then we're okay.
Yeah, it's like anything. You know, when I got started with Beverly's article about execute SQL, and when the light finally went on, you know, I went to W3 Schools and just, oh, hey, I can add another function. Oh, hey, I can add this. You know, a little at a time. And now I you know, I'm not a SQL guy at all, but you know, I can certainly do execute SQL in FileMaker pretty well.
Great. Yeah. And I think part of my mission is to, number one, show people what can be done in FileMaker, but also with JavaScript, but also to to make the language not intimidating for us, because
demystify. You were going to say demystify.
I was going to say D something. I don't know, but yeah, you're right. It's along those lines. In that, yeah. So that's the point of this, is to just kind of give you a cold set, a found set of JavaScript that you can focus on, and then, hey, branch out and learn other stuff, but as you need it. But this is what I think. This is what it seems that we use all the time in FileMaker. So I'll keep on going here. The point of all that mind map is, for me as a FileMaker developer and a JavaScript person and an educator, is to provide some structure for any lesson plans and any exercises that people would do. And for the last couple of years, I've done at DevCon a JavaScript training session. First year was a half a day, and it didn't go very well because there was so much to do in 3 hours. And the second day, the second year, it was much more successful. But we still had issues with the web viewer and with JavaScript and FileMaker. And luckily, now 19 removes some of those. So I have redesigned my file yet again to give us specific practices to help us with each of these use cases. You can see the categories off to the left, and the colored rectangles there represent the different concepts, the different categories or use cases there. So what I'm planning on doing is working up videos about these, running through each of these exercises with people and giving them, from my FileMaker developer's perspective, what JavaScript they can know to be successful. And this is always using FileMaker data, and in a lot of cases, it's doing some real FileMaker stuff. So let me get into that here. Here is the file. And I'm pretty happy about this. As a teacher, I strive to make everything as clear and easy to understand as possible. So this is my attempt to do that. And I'm just going to focus on a couple of these today to start. So here are the exercises. We've also got concepts in JavaScript that I've pulled out, and we're going to actually use this one today, the array methods, where we go to the Mozilla documents, the actual JavaScript documents, and we read about all of the different methods of working with arrays. So again, coming with me and working this path with me, I would lead you through this so that it's very successful. This is not a commercial, by the way. I don't know what we're doing with this. It may just be up on Geist Interactive site for people to download and walk through the videos on their own. So I'm not trying to sell you on anything.
What's your timetable on that, Jeremy?
I have no idea. We're trying to we're figuring it out here, but
Okay. You ought to release it like a subscription or something.
something, yeah. I don't, yeah. We'll see what it is. To me, I mean, yeah, it's nice to make money, but it's also very nice to get
Well,
more people using JavaScript.
well, I didn't really mean so much make money, although that probably would be functional. But I was thinking like different modules. You know,
Yes.
okay,
Oh.
here we got the basic steps, and then we got the 102 level stuff, and then the 103, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that the stuff that you've got done, we can let it, you can let it out, and we can start playing with it, and then next month you come out with a new module that's got more stuff in it, and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we could follow along with you, give you feedback, and but also people could get started, which is the big thing.
Okay. So this exercise guide is meant to help work with me or somebody to walk through these different exercises pertaining to the different actions. And I'm just going to do one real quick. I'm going to write a basic function in JavaScript. We've got the HTML over here. We don't actually have any CSS. We are going to write in the JavaScript. So, in this first task is to write a function that shows hello world in a JavaScript dialog. And there's a couple ways to do that. We're going to do it this way. We're going to write function hello, or I will just write first function. And this, I'm writing it and I'm explaining it to you. That's how we write a function. We first declare it in a line by using the function word keyword. We give it a name in most cases. These parentheses are meant for parameters that we would pass into it from outside of the function. And then inside these curly braces, we do something, we perform some action. So this is a use case that we're going to do a lot in FileMaker. We're going to write functions. Now, if I run this code, nothing's going to happen because the only thing I've done here is I've declared this function. I've just put it into the web viewer's memory, the browser's memory, and it's ready, it's available when I call it. So the next step for me would be to call it. And when I do that, I get this line here, line 9, causing this to run and causing that action to perform. So this is a concept in FileMaker, a concept in JavaScript that we actually know from FileMaker. We know how to write scripts. Calling the scripts is a little bit different than calling a function in this case, but there are, we can also call a function here from a FileMaker script or a JavaScript, an HTML button. So that's the basics of what we would do. I do have a place to grab the answer here. In this case, I'm writing a variable here. I'm gonna make sure I don't see anything. I'm writing a variable here using the var keyword, giving it a name, and assigning it a value. We all do that with FileMaker. It's very tempting to use the $sign here, but that's not the case here. And we've got my function here. This time it's accepting an argument, something called text, and that text is passed into the function. And then when I call this function, I'm actually passing in the variable, the value of the variable. And so when I run that, this value gets passed into this function, which gets passed into this right here, this built-in method, and it's run. So that's the very basics. Now, I'm going a little fast here because, and I'm not meant to, we're not walking, don't give this to everybody. We're not working through it together. I just want to show you that it's fairly accessible, and working at each of these one at a time is useful. The later exercises build on others, in a certain order that I've set. But that's just how we would go about this. I'm going to just show one more quick. This creating a table from an array is a lot of fun. in that I'm not going to write this JavaScript, but I want to show you what it's doing. So I've got an array of data here. This is like, I don't know, 30 records or something. Actually, it might be 60 records. Yeah, it's 60 records that I pulled out of a database that I had. It's an array of objects here. And what I wanted to do is write a JavaScript function to convert an object into this, to a JavaScript table. So I'm going to just grab the answer because it'll take a little bit to write this. Normally we would write this together. But in this case, I'll just kind of go through it a bit. Again, hopefully to show you how accessible it is. We're grabbing the data from this field using a piece of placeholder text that I've got set up. We are then we have a function here that is actually going to create a table, and it's going to create rows in tables and cells in tables or columns. And it's going to take a piece of the data from here. Let's see what's going on. It's going to take a piece of the data from here, and it's going to stick it into one of the columns. So I'm just going to run this, and this is what it looks like. So it's taking, I don't know why it's not formatting, but it's taking the fact and it's putting it into this column, and it's taking the type, I think, and putting it into the first column. And if I wanted to, you know, I could just come in here and I could update this and say, I could say var year equals document dot create text node array dot year. I'm grabbing for each of the rows in that, for each of the objects in the array, I'm grabbing the year, and then I'm going to append that to, let's see here. Actually, I need to create another one of these. Again, sorry for going fast, but it's just, I just want to show you what it could be, what could be done. And let's see if this works. tdy dot append child year, and let's see if this works. tr dot append child tdy. All right, I hope this works. Probably not, but we'll see. Yep, look at that. Okay, so I was able to add the column over on the right side. That didn't take too much time. You know, it took a little bit of time to do this, but this is a basic this is part of the use case I was describing, taking the data and manipulating it. I'm using an array method called for each, and I'm running this function. So for each just goes through each element in that array, and it does this thing with the array. It's, if you can imagine, it's just stripping off the first object, creating this row, going to the next object, creating this row, placing it into the web viewer, and so forth. Okay. Now I do want to do one last thing before I say, you know, I'm going to stop here, but we talk about styling, we talk about how it looks. I just want to show you that if I think about styling and I look at the framework, the styling framework called Bootstrap, and I bring it into my document, I can immediately have a much more styled table. This is just very basic. I didn't do anything special. All I did was I added a framework here that from online. It's from a content delivery network right here. So it has to be online, but it immediately helps me style it and make it look better. This red row, I think, is coming from something in here, some styling in here. My dogs love to bark at things. And so that's that. So again, walking with me through this path, we would learn these concepts of JavaScript, CSS, and HTML all together. But I think this here is kind of my view of how you as a FileMaker developer can learn JavaScript. The playground file that you saw previously is almost available. The old version of it is available on Geist Interactive site, and I'll find that link and put it in the chat here. This one is not quite ready because it goes with this path thing, and you're the first people to see it. So anyway, wanted to thank you for letting me talk about this. I really encourage you to use JavaScript to explore it. And I think with something like this, it's a lot more attainable. That goal is more attainable. One more plug, I guess. In my JavaScript session, all I'm doing is a survey of various JavaScript libraries. This one is called No UI Slider, and it's what produces this right here. So this is that communication back to FileMaker. It's passing the value of where the slider was dropped. But again, this all came just by writing. Here are the questions, and my JavaScript skills finally allowed me to create a function that creates one slider element and the question. This whole thing per question in my if I strip out, some of these, then I only have, the remainder of the questions there. So that's what my Engage session is about, is to look at the different libraries that I found and see how they solve problems, some of the associated problems with such as list views and FileMaker and so forth. So watch the Claris Engage site for that. And, I'll let Jonathan know when it's dropped and can get it out to you as well.
Okay. So if anybody has any specific question, feel free to sing out. You could unmute yourself and ask it.
While you do, I'll kind of just demonstrate some of the other, I'm giving away my Claris Engage session, but that's okay. This is the first thing that I built, and some of you may have seen this, but this is what I built when I was at Soliant. This was my first attempt to really organize myself and to see what could be done with FileMaker in JavaScript in FileMaker. This file here was an attempt to show everything that could be done, creating an audio player, do some charting, the calendar, which is famous now, at least, everybody's using it. I really like this one. This was one of my favorites. It's poorly designed, and I need to do a lot of work to make this be nice, but it's a good use, and it can be done in FileMaker. That's pretty awesome. The whole thing that I built here, while it doesn't seem very, practical, it's all JavaScript. This is based on a JavaScript app that I built. I built this as an add-on. It's an add-on called Squares. For some reason, it's not, there's no squares in there. But this allows me to show different data sets. In this case, this one is pulling from the exercises. This is actually a different web viewer that's pulling all of the concepts from the concept table. And this is a different web viewer using the same Squares add-on that's showing the different resources that we would need to use, or that we'll use in the time. So this right here is a great example of kind of another possibility. You can't do this in FileMaker. I guess it could be a 3-column portal, but this goes left to right, not up down. So this would take a little bit more time to work on. So here's some other things. This is pretty cool. I like that. It's one of my favorites. This is the list view. It's a list view alternative where I talk about, in FileMaker, to build this would require a script to run over here. How would you do this? For each column that needs to be sorted, you would have, you'd have to write a script and attach it to each one of these buttons. This is cool, and we could actually do this in FileMaker, but I could actually go into the code right here somewhere. Where's my columns? Here's my columns. And I could change this from checkbox to switcher because that's a type that this library allows for. And now I've got a nice interface UI element. This allows me on the double click to click in here and open it up again in FileMaker. And again, this is just my basic JavaScript skills, following that path and working with JavaScript libraries. This is the JavaScript library right here. This is what runs that grid that you saw. I have no idea how any of this works. It's not for me to know. This is just, I have to take it on faith that this works. This is a commercial version. I'm using an unlicensed copy, but I wanted to show both free and licensed ones. So this library runs it. From there, I can send it some options, and the options are listed right here. I'm gonna take those. I'm gonna move over to VS Code. This is all that. This is exactly what I'm going to be doing in my session, so you guys get to see a preview. So these options, this object of options is what I can go in and I can update. I can change things like how, by default, how wide will each column be. I can say that they are either editable true or false. I could say that they're sortable true or false. I can write down, let's see here. Here's a title bar. I can add some information to the title bar here. This is actually that search box type search right here. And then I can tell this JavaScript, I can tell this library, hey, you've got a set of data. Here's the data. It's from the execute FileMaker data API script step. And I want you to put into the second column, because the first column is that switcher. I want you to put the first name. I want you to grab the first name out of the data, out of each row of the data set and put the first name there. Last name, address, city, and sales, and so forth. Looks like I can, for this column here, I can tell it, you know what, I want you to set the type to currency so that we get the nice, we get the dollar signs over there. So this is a good example of that. Let's see what other ones I have. The charting one I showed just in picture form, but here's what it looks like. You know, this particular library solves a lot of use cases. It makes things so much more interactive. Oh shoot, a lot of. Let's see. I'm going to answer this question. Would it make sense to show non-graphic reports with JS in a web viewer as opposed to using a virtual list? That's a good question. The only thing I would say to that is if you want to print them, I would always revert back to FileMaker because the web viewer still hasn't solved the printing problem. And if the report is many pages long, it's more difficult to be able to export from the web viewer. There are various methods out there, but none of them are as easy as just going back to FileMaker and printing it. People don't need the search functionality. People don't need this. They don't need this. They don't need the UI element here. They don't need any of this stuff that makes the JavaScript library attractive. They don't need that on a printed report. Chart looks really nice. It solves a lot of problems that we have with the regular charting object, which I advocate for, and Beverly knows this. Anybody who brings up a question about the FileMaker chart object, I try to answer them because that's where we start, and that's okay. So I can, I said this in my video for the session, but this Apex charting library right here again. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm pulling from online right here. Good thing I have internet right now. I'm pulling the JavaScript library down into the web viewer via the internet right here. This has a ton of functions, a ton of options, things to manipulate. I can manipulate anything on this screen that you see here. I can manipulate how many horizontal lines are on here. I can manipulate where the label is, or if the label is even showing. I can label each series color, change each series color. I can change the formatting of this down here. So notice it's in 819. That's the American way, the US way to do it. But I could go in here and I could say, where is that? Let's see. Well, here's the label. Here's the size. So I could change the size. Oh, I could go up somewhere up here. Yeah. So this function is returning it. It's a little bit more complex, but I could actually change this. I'm just going to show you for an example with a different format. And I think this will work. Actually, that was the wrong one. Let's do MM. Is it MMM? What is it? This is just a, no, I must be uppercase. I wonder if it's uppercase. This is a JavaScript library that works with dates and formats them in the way that I want. So 1M just gives me the month number. What would 2 capital M's do? Gives me 2 month numbers. What would 3 M's do? Let's see if that's a thing. There we go. So now I've got the short version of it. And MMM, what would MMM do? There we go. So now I got the long version of it. So see that? I can make that change. That would be really tough to do in FileMaker. So this is an example of that. Thanks, David. Let's see here. What else do I have? Oh, this one is fun. This is a finance library that I found that has financial functions. This is what I call a sneaky widget because you don't see a web viewer on it. This is a layout with a button bar. It's FileMaker button bar. See that? The web viewer is actually off screen. It's only used as a calculation engine. It's only used to calculate the compound annual growth rate for a certain set of numbers. And in my demo file, I just have this JSON object that holds the various parameters that I need for each of the functions. But any FileMaker developer can override this and say, here are my numbers, the script that they compound annual growth rate, they could go in here and instead of pulling from this data field, they could write their own parameters here that match what's needed and then their own numbers from FileMaker fields. So this is just another example of showing how the web viewer can be used. This is a JavaScript library, but it has no UI element. It's just doing some math that FileMaker doesn't have a discount factor function. You could sure create it via a script or a function for sure. But this is just an example of using the JavaScript, the web viewer as a calculation engine. And in some cases, JavaScript is so much faster and it does it better than what FileMaker could do. I'll show you that. Yeah.
You would also have to write your own functions
Exactly.
and know the math.
Yep.
Net present value, is that on there? Yeah, present value is a complicated, oh, there you are. Yeah, it's a complicated calculation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what that is. I know what net present value is. I just don't know how to calculate it. So just having something that I can plug in, say, there you are. There's my on-screen calculator. That would be so nice.
Yeah, I'll show you another example of this. I'm fascinated by this. I love working with this. So there's a library called Moment.js that I spoke of a brief minute ago that works with dates, that calculates, works with dates. And what's cool about this is it can even work with the locale. So if you're in Europe or somewhere, you have a different date settings, this can work with it. But this does a heck of a lot more than we could do in FileMaker. I'm just going to show you quick. I'm going to run this code This is going to take, actually, you know what? I've got it typed up here. I'm just going to copy it in there to save me time. I'm just going to show you this here. We're starting with the date, today's date, and we're formatting it similar to what I did with the chart. Then we're saying we're creating another variable called E that shows the start date of Claris Engage. And then I'm going to console log, which is writing to that, what you saw. I'm going to console log this date formatted like this. And I'm going to console log how many days until Claris Engage from now. So there's a function in Moment.js called from now. And you just, you give it a date, which is this right here. And you say from now. So if I run the code, we bring up the console. Today is Tuesday, and according to the Moment.js, Claris engages in 6 days. So doing this is pretty awesome as a calculation because Moment.js can do this. You could even do this. You could say, let's do this quick. Var a equals moment d dot add 3 or 4 days. Let's see what that does. Console.e. Okay. So we run it, and now we get, oh, you know what? I need to do, just one second. I need to do, and then I'm going to format it, format month, day. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I got the wrong variable. Thank you. Moment.js. There we go. All right. So in 4 days, it'll be August 1st. Or if you're outside of the United States, it'll be January 8th. Is that right? It's one of those two things. So if you're outside the US, sorry, you got to start this year 2020 all over again. But that's that. So I could do that. I could say, you know what, I want you to add 4 years and then, you know, do the year and run that. So this has just got some really awesome things that you can do. This library can even help you find the first Tuesday of the month or the last Tuesday of the month or something like that. So this is another example of just using it as a calculation engine and doing it because, you know, working with dates in FileMaker to me is tough. It's difficult. And the fact that we have different ways to represent a date, that's problematic. And I've seen those issues come all over as we share files across the globe. Moment.js can handle that and work with it better. So this is another example of using JavaScript in your FileMaker apps. So we got that. What else I have thousands on my machine.
Well, I have a question, if I may. So other than using the web viewer, where else is JavaScript useful in FileMaker?
Well, at the moment, you have to have a web viewer to run JavaScript.
Okay.
So it's really useful in 3 ways. Number one, you can create a full screen widget using a web viewer, like the calendar or the timeline thing that I showed you at the beginning. It's full screen. It takes up the entire screen. You could also create some that are just part of the screen. They're kind of like subtle ones. They're in a popover or a card window. That might be like a date picker. Let me bring that one up here.
Like a widget or something.
So here's a date picker. And, you know, it's actually a date range picker. So that's pretty cool because I can send that back to FileMaker with a date range. Can't build that in FileMaker very well. But this could be in a popover. It could be in a card window that pops up and you click in there and you do your thing. And then The other thing that I have shown you is the calculation engine. I call it a sneaky widget because it's just off to the side, doing its own thing, and you don't even see it. So at the moment,
But again, it's a web viewer. It's just
yeah,
not.
these are all web viewers because that's where
That's where you have the JavaScript runtime engine.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's all of mine run off of this calculation field that just does a bunch of substituting in the values in these fields for this placeholder text.
So it would be really cool to have a JavaScript runtime engine that didn't require the web viewer.
Yeah, the thing that you would need that for, right, is the calculation stuff. But it's really to me, it's really not difficult. And I've thought about this, but like the finance thing, you could run this from anywhere in your script. It pops open a window with the web viewer and then it shuts it. It does the work there, then it shuts it. So, this one is right off the screen. If I wanted to use these all over the place, this would be kind of a pain in the butt to have to transfer all of this over all the time. But you could just have this on a card window, open her up, do the work, shut it. To me, I don't see any real problem with using having the web viewer, off to the side or invisible or something.
Okay.
So, yeah. Let's see. What else do I have?
So do you have some basic getting started tutorials? Some I know you got HTML there.
Yeah.
So that's pretty straightforward, but the JavaScript syntax is still kind of alien to me.
Yep, and that's where some of my trainings can help. Again, I'm trying not to be. What I would suggest is we take this learning path idea, and you find things that can teach you that. Me here at Geist Interactive will find ways to present that from a FileMaker perspective. So that's what I would suggest. The people who are FileMaker developers who also know JavaScript are in the best position to give advice and to teach people because we know the struggles of a FileMaker developer. JavaScript developers don't know what FileMaker is, but we know both. So So I'll let you know as soon as I can figure out a timeline. But this is because of Claris Engaged. Todd did a webinar recently with Claris about add-ons in JavaScript, and he reminded me that I should update this playground file. So I've been working hard on getting it. So, and that led me into the mind map thing and so forth. So I'm not quite done yet, and I'll let you know as soon as I get there.
That's good. Yeah.